to a series of conferences on Contemplative Lifestyle. I'm Father John Francis Sequeira, a Carmelite priest belonging to Karnataka, Goa province in India. The theme of our conference today is Purification of the Soul. Let me begin this conference by giving you one more imagery. This time, the imagery of the sun entering your house through the clear window panels. Let us imagine that you had built a house some 25 years ago. You purchased a plot of land near a highway and built your dream house. Since you allowed a lot of light inside the house, you built your house designing plenty of window panels or shutters with clear glasses. Then the house was all over and came the day of the inauguration. It was a midday summer and you sat at the office and the hot scorching sun's rays directly penetrated through the window panel and fell on you. How long do you think you could sit there? I'm sure not more than a few minutes. The reason being that the hot sun's rays coming through the window glass panel heated up your body, making you practically impossible to sit on your seat. Now my question to you is this: what made the hot sun's rays to fall on your body? You would surely reply, the clear and clean glass panels. You are right. Again, that night, you turned on all the lights of your house and you can see the brightness of the light for a quite considerable distance outside. The reason being, again, the clear and clean glass panels of the window. Now let us say about 25 years have elapsed and the house, being on a highway, is covered with a lot of dust and smoke. In these 25 years, you have never made an attempt to clean up your window panels. How thick would the dust be on it? Sure, quite thick enough. Now again on a sunny day, when there is a scorching sunlight outside, you come and sit in your office where you had the experience of a scorching heat of the sun 25 years ago. What would you experience now? For your surprise, no sun's rays at all, or even if there are, very minimal. At night, as usual, you turn on all the lights of your house. Would there be any light spreading outside? The answer is no. What is the reason? The answer to both questions would be because the glass panels had thick layer of dust. They were not cleaned, blocking the sun's rays penetrating from outside and the electrical light going out from inside the house. Right? Something similar, my dear friends, happened to each one of us in our spiritual life. God had built a beautiful palace called ourselves. He designed a lot of windows called the Faculties of the soul in order that His grace may penetrate deep within, which is transcendental in nature, and His immanent grace of charity be manifested from within. It is important, therefore, to diagnose where we stand today in the mission of this transmission of grace. That will also tell us how much we have grown and transformed in the likeness of His love. In order to do this diagnosis, we require to have a correct knowledge of the soul. Let me follow St. Thomas Aquinas here, with whom St. John of the Cross agrees and falls back on for most of his spiritual analysis. Human person, according to scholastic philosophy, is divided into three parts, namely the body, the mind, and the spirit. Through epistemological principle, we know that nothing enters into the intellect unless it first comes through the senses. Hence, all our natural knowledge comes from either through the senses, through the means of perception, or through the mediation of the intellect through rationalization. However, there is another faculty in every human person called the spirit, which is the cause of all supernatural knowledge in the intellect to grace. Let us go into it a little deeper. Human soul, says St. Thomas, is divided into two parts: sensory soul and the spiritual soul. With the sensory, we share our nature with plant and animal world. Sensory soul, in turn, is divided into two parts: external senses and the internal senses. External senses, as we know, are five. That is, seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, and tasting. Internal senses are three: imagination, fantasy, and what we call associated memory. Spiritual soul, on the other hand, is divided into three parts: memory, intellect, and the will. St. Thomas concludes that the center of the soul is God. In other words, it is destined that God would direct the entire person from being within, provided that we be willing to be guided by His Spirit. Now, when God created all these human faculties, both sensory and spiritual, He created them for a purpose, which we call the natural or the ordinate appetite of the soul. It is through the right use of the natural or the ordinate appetites a person keeps himself open to the moment of grace, therefore grows in the likeness of Christ. Hence, natural or the ordinate appetites of the soul can never hinder the human person in his or her spiritual quest. We have discussed this in our previous conference. Any abuse or misuse of the faculties of the soul slowly leads the one to the habitual practices of it, called habitual appetites or the inordinate appetite of the soul. They are nothing but repeated and willed clingings to things less than God for their own sake. It is these spiritual appetites that really take our attention away from God and slows down, if not destroys, our spiritual pursuit. The imagery which I gave at the beginning of this conference makes sense at this moment. All our knowledge, as we know, comes to us through the senses, both external and internal, through the form of percepts. The intellect transforms these percepts into concepts and preserves them in the memory with the permission of the will. I think this is the simplistic explanation I can give you on our knowledge production system. If the faculties are used in an ordinate form, then the content of the mind or the knowledge formed thereby is pure and therefore in no way can harm the soul or spiritual pursuit. However, our lower faculties have a tendency for the immediate gratification of pleasure. And imaginations and fantasies can accelerate these gratifications, while the will yields to these gratifications, making the intellect fall a prey to these gratifications. The inordinate or the habitual appetites of the soul are formed. These inordinate appetites, through continuous repetitive acts, not only distort the right knowledge, but also destroys the direction of the soul through the dimming of the soul. These inordinate appetites or the habitual appetites can do a great harm to the soul. Let us enumerate a few of them just for the academic purpose. Number one, the dimming vision of the soul. St. John of the Cross says that human soul is befogged in its natural capacity and in receiving the supernatural wisdom when it clings to finite things for their own sakes. St. Paul expresses it this way: those who are unspiritual do not receive the gifts of God's Spirit, for they are foolishness to them. And they are unable to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. 1 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 14. For John of the Cross, our unredeemed desires are like a cataract over our eyes, a truth that any spiritual director can verify. It is also our experience that people who are single-mindedly and wholeheartedly pursuing God immediately understand the finer points of evangelical perfection, while equally intelligent but worldly men and women simply cannot comprehend an identical explanation. Number two, it creates ripple effects or sinful ramifications. Seeking things for themselves rather than as means leading to God are surprisingly lead to all sorts of other aberrations. Just as good is diffusing of itself, so too sin begets a progeny of evils. Number three, impediments to prayer and awareness to God. I think this is self-explanatory. Each one of us are sinful enough to know well from experience that a selfish clinging focuses our attention on ourselves and draws us away from divine presence. It prevents us from preferring what is more pleasing to God, instead chooses our own pleasure. Most of our distractions we suffer during prayer are nothing but the direct result of our disordered concerns and desires. Number four, it diminishes our inner joy. Contrary to what the world thinks, attachments are, I would say, killjoys. The worldly man and woman think that the more they possess and multiply their experiences, the more happy they would become. But the experience shows us just the opposite. Our boredom at parties, heartburn after overeating, after effects of a drug abuse, emptiness after loveless sexual encounters, failure to find fulfillment in fine fashions or expensive excursions only show us sense pleasures can't give us joy. No matter how intense may be for the moment, they leave in their wake a vacuous disillusionment. It was not by accident St. Paul advises the Philippians to rejoice in the Lord always. Genuine joy, lasting joy is possible in the Lord alone. Number five, they diminish the human person. Love places one on the level of the object loves. Or as St. John of the Cross would say, attachments diminish the person because love effects a likeness with the object loved. Human person is such marvelous image of God that their clinging to anything less diminishes them, just as diamond or a golden vessel is stained by admixture with anything less than itself. The person, therefore, must cling only to God, and in this clinging be elevated, ennobled, and beautified. And finally, it blocks spiritual transformation. All that we have spoken till now only argues for a point, that how inordinate appetites prevent our final transformation into divine beauty. Until a person is purified of all his clingings, says St. John of the Cross, he will not be equipped to possess God, neither here below through the pure transformation of love, nor in heaven through the beatific vision. Ascent of Mount Carmel, Book 1, Chapter 4, verse number 3. Now the question arises, how shall we purify our soul? St. John of the Cross would tell us that since the human beings are finite in nature and have a tendency to fall, it is primarily important to fix our sight on God and not on the worldly things. For divine love alone can purify us from all defilement. Secondly, given our fallen nature, purification of our faculties is a lifelong journey, not a once-for-all act of purification. Thirdly, since God has given us a critical intellect and a moral conscience, one can always go within oneself and distinguish the difference between ordinate and inordinate appetites of the soul and take measures to purify oneself with the gift of God's grace. One of the simple methods of purification of the soul that I follow myself and teach my recipient is what I want to present before you as a model. Take a suitable quiet place and a relaxed time, if possible, every week. Take your personal diary and a pen, and in a prayerful moment, go through each of the faculties of the soul, beginning with the 5 external senses, and then to the 3 internal senses, and finally to the 3 spiritual faculties, which I have mentioned above. Ask yourself, which are the inordinate appetites and which are the ordinate appetites of each of these senses? For example, the sight. Where have I given glory to God and where I have failed? Write them in your diary. After the detailed analysis of each faculty, write a resolution how you want to better yourself in giving glory to God. This practical method would help you to attain in a simple way a great spiritual pursuit. However, let us not forget that we are not loners in this spiritual journey. When we take one step, our God would take 10 steps for us. He would help us in His own way, the purification of each one of us, which we call passive purification of the soul. That topic is for another day. Let our prayer be today. Purify me, O Lord, and cleanse me from all my defilements, so that I may enshrine in me your divine beauty. Amen. God bless you.